Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was trapped in Sword Art Online as the strongest player? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The scent of ozone and singed asphalt still clung to Izuku Midoriya's training uniform. His muscles ached with the satisfying burn of a day well spent pushing his limits under the watchful eye of Aizawa-sensei. Every joint complained, a testament to another grueling session of honing full cowling, of trying to turn a cataclysmic power into an extension of his own body. He was exhausted, but it was a good kind of exhaustion, the kind that promised progress. In his dorm room at Yui Heights Alliance, surrounded by the ever-watchful, smiling visage of All Might from posters and figurines, Izuku carefully unboxed his prize. It was a recent gift, a surprise from All Might himself, presented with a hearty laugh and a clap on the back that nearly sent him through the floor. "Young Midoriya," he'd said, his voice booming even in his skeletal form. "A hero needs balance. You cannot just train and study. You need rest. Recreation. This is what all the kids are talking about." A full dive. The box was sleek and white, bearing the elegant logo, Nerve Gear. And nestled within was the most anticipated game release in history, Sword Art Online. Izuku had researched it, of course. He'd filled half a notebook with analysis on the developer, the enigmatic genius Kayaba Akihiko, and the revolutionary technology that promised to fully immerse a player's consciousness in a virtual world. It was a different kind of world-saving, a digital frontier. He saw it less as a game and more as an unparalleled simulation. A chance to practice problem-solving and teamwork in a low-stakes environment. Or at least, that was the justification he gave himself. The truth was simpler. It looked incredibly cool. He followed the setup instructions with a familiar, mumbling focus. "Okay, so the microwave emitters intercept and redirect the signals from my brain, rerouting motor commands to the in-game avatar while blocking them from my physical body. That's incredible. The processing power required for real-time translation of neural impulses into game code must be..." "Wait, focus, Midoriya." He lay down on his bed, the Nerve Gear helmet feeling cool and heavy over his head. His heart hammered against his ribs, a familiar drumbeat of anticipation and anxiety that accompanied every new beginning. "Link start," he commanded, his voice a little shaky. The world dissolved. Not into darkness, but into a kaleidoscope of light and color, a rushing tunnel of data that felt both disorienting and exhilarating. A series of calibration screens floated before him. Language, Japanese. Height. Weight. He meticulously matched the settings to his real-world self. Then came the avatar creation. He scrolled through dozens of presets. Stoic warriors with chiseled jaws, elegant mages with silver hair, roguish assassins shrouded in shadow. For a moment, he considered creating someone different, someone cooler, more confident. Someone like Kaken, maybe? But the thought felt wrong, dishonest. All Might had taught him to be a symbol, and a symbol had to be true. He adjusted the sliders, painstakingly recreating his own face, the round cheeks, the spray of freckles, the unruly mop of dark green hair. An honest face. His face. For his player name, he hesitated for only a second before typing it in. Deku. Uraraka had changed its meaning for him. She had turned a word of scorn into a word of encouragement. "You can do it." He would carry that meaning with him here, too. A final prompt appeared. "Welcome to Sword Art Online, Deku. Do you wish to proceed?" He took a deep, steadying breath. Yes. The tunnel of light gave way to a brilliant, impossible blue sky. The scent of fresh grass and sun-warmed stone filled his lungs. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of a nearby tree and tugged at the simple leather tunic he now wore. He stood in a bustling plaza paved with golden cobblestones, surrounded by architecture that seemed torn from a fairy tale. Timber-framed houses, a towering clock tower, and in the far distance, the impossibly vast trunk of a colossal tree that seemed to hold up the sky itself. This was the town of beginnings. "Whoa," he breathed, turning in a slow circle. He looked down at his hands, wiggling his fingers. They moved perfectly, clad in simple leather gloves. He took a step, then another, the sensation indistinguishable from reality. He could feel the solid ground beneath his boots, the weight of the basic short sword sheathed at his hip. His system menu shimmered into existence with a flick of his fingers, a clean, translucent window floating in the air. His stats were abysmal, all single digits. His HP bar was a hopeful green. Under skills, there was only one-handed sword and sprinting. It was a blank slate. A fresh start. A player with bright pink hair waved at him. "First time?" she asked, her voice cheerful. "It's amazing, right?" "I'm Lyra." "I'm Deku," he stammered, his real-world habits carrying over. It's more than I imagined." "You're telling me." "I've been running around just touching things for 10 minutes, she laughed. "The fountain water is actually cool. Go try it." Players were everywhere, a vibrant, excited crowd of 10,000 people all sharing the same dream. They were laughing, marveling at the world, forming tentative parties to go hunt the boars just outside the town gates. The energy was infectious, a pure, unadulterated joy. For the first time in a long time, Izuku felt the crushing weight of One for All, the constant pressure to be the next symbol of peace, simply fade away. Here, he wasn't All Might's successor. He was just Deku, a level 1 adventurer. He spent the next hour in a state of blissful discovery. He followed Lyra's advice and splashed his hands in the town fountain. He haggled clumsily with an NPC merchant, buying a small loaf of bread and marveling at the taste. He sat on a bench and simply watched other players, his analytical mind kicking in as he observed their gear, their movements, their excitement. It was peaceful. It was perfect. And then the bell began to toll. It was not a cheerful sound. It was a deep, ominous chime that seemed to shake the very foundations of the plaza. A blue glow enveloped Izuku's body, and the world dissolved into a flash of light. When it reformed, he was back in the central plaza, along with every other player in the game. A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the thousand-strong crowd. "A server-wide event already?" Someone nearby muttered. "Is this part of the opening ceremony?" Another asked. Izuku's eyes scanned the crowd, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. The logout button. He flicked open his menu, his fingers tracing the air. The button was gone. Not grayed out, not disabled. It was simply missing. "Hey, where's the logout button?" The question, first a whisper, grew into a panicked chorus. A deep sense of dread, cold and sharp, pierced through Izuku's initial awe. This felt wrong. This felt like a villain's monologue, the moment before an attack. His hero's senses, honed by countless life-or-death battles, were screaming at him. As if on cue, the sky began to bleed. The brilliant blue bled into a deep, crimson red. Hexagonal patterns, like a digital warning sign, pulsed across the artificial sky. The crowd fell silent, their faces turned upward in a mixture of fear and confusion. From the center of the sky, a vast, hooded figure descended. It was a colossal being made of red light and glitch data, its face hidden in shadow. It wore the robes of a game master. "Attention, players," a voice echoed, calm, disembodied, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Welcome to my world." The figure spread its arms. "My name is Kayaba Akihiko. And as of this moment, I am the only person who can control this world." Izuku's blood ran cold. "Kayaba? The creator? I am sure you have all noticed by now that the logout button is missing from your main menus," the voice continued, matter-of-factly. "This is not a defect in the game. I repeat, this is not a defect. This is a feature of Sword Art Online." Panic began to bubble within the crowd. Shouts of "What does he mean? And this isn't funny!" broke the silence. "You cannot log out of SAO of your own free will," Kayaba declared, his voice cutting through the noise. "And no one from the outside will be able to shut down or remove the nerve gear. Should this be attempted, the transmitter inside the nerve gear will emit a powerful microwave, destroying your brain and thus ending your life." A wave of pure, undiluted terror crashed over the plaza. Screams erupted. People fell to their knees. Izuku felt his own breath catch in his throat, his heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm. Destroying your brain? Ending your life? This can't be real. Furthermore, Kayaba's voice was merciless. This condition will be removed for a player if their HP drops to 0. If you die here, your nerve gear will fry your brain, and you will die in the real world. The meaning of his words settled over the crowd like a funeral shroud. This wasn't a game anymore. This was a prison. A death trap. There is only one way to escape, the creator announced. You must clear this game. Before you is the floating castle of Aincrad, which has 100 floors. You must defeat the monsters and the floor boss on each level to advance. Defeat the final boss on floor 100, and the game will be cleared for all surviving players. A final, cruel flourish was added. Finally, I have provided you all with a little gift. Please check your inventories. Izuku numbly opened his menu, his hands shaking. In his inventory was a single new item, hand mirror. He tapped it. A shimmer of light engulfed him. When it faded, he looked the same, but all around him, gasps and screams of shock echoed. Avatars were changing, morphing. The tall, stoic warrior beside him became a lanky, scared teenager. The cute, cat-haired girl became a burly man. Everyone's idealized avatars were being forcibly replaced by their real-world appearances. Izuku looked into his mirror and saw his own familiar, freckled face staring back, wide-eyed with horror. His choice to be himself had spared him that particular shock, but it did nothing to lessen the terror of his situation. Kaiba's form began to dissolve. The tutorial for Sword Art Online's official launch is now complete. I wish you all the best of luck, players. And then he was gone. The red sky remained. For a full minute, there was only a stunned, horrified silence. Then chaos erupted. It was a tidal wave of panic. People screamed, cried, and shouted in denial. Some tried fruitlessly to run through the walls of the plaza, their bodies bouncing off the invisible barrier of the safe zone. Others simply collapsed, sobbing. Izuku felt the same fear clawing at his throat. His mom. All Might. His friends back at UA. He was trapped. He could die here. The thought was paralyzing. His legs trembled, and for a terrifying second, he thought he was going to be one of the people who just fell apart. But then, through the cacophony of despair, he heard a small, sharp cry. He turned and saw a young girl, no older than 12, who had fallen to her knees, her small body racked with sobs. I want to go home, she wept, her voice lost in the din. Something inside Izuku snapped into place. It was the same switch that flipped when a civilian was in danger, the same instinct that had sent him hurtling towards the sludge villain to save Kaken. His fear didn't vanish, but it was shoved into a box, locked away by a far more powerful, ingrained impulse. A hero saves people. He pushed his way through the panicking crowd, his movements purposeful. He knelt in front of the girl, keeping his voice as calm and steady as he could manage. Hey, he said softly. It's okay. It's going to be okay. The girl looked up, her eyes red and puffy. But he said we could die. I know, Izuku said, his voice gentle but firm. It's scary. I'm scared too. But panicking won't help. We need to stay calm and think. What's your name? Arena, she sniffled. Okay, Rena. My name is Deku. We're going to get through this. I promise. He offered her a hand. It was trembling slightly, but he held it out nonetheless. First, let's get away from the crowd. It's safer. Helping her to her feet, he guided her towards the edge of the plaza, his mind racing, already analyzing, processing. Kaiba's rules, don't die. Clear 100 floors. Okay. That's the goal. The objective is clear, like a rescue mission with thousands of hostages. What's the first step? Information. Resources? Strength. I'm level 1. I have nothing. I can't save anyone if I can't even protect myself. The initial wave of panic in the town square began to subside into a grim, terrified stillness. Some players, consumed by despair, simply sat where they were. Others, more pragmatic, were already forming small groups, their faces grim as they discussed what to do next. A few, like him, were trying to help, offering words of comfort or sharing the meager starting items they had. Izuku knew staying in the town of beginnings was a slow death. The resources here were finite. They had to move forward. They had to get stronger. He led Rena to a quiet street, and made sure she found a small group of other young players who were huddling together for comfort. Stay here for now, he told them. Stay in the safe zone. Don't go outside the walls until the stronger players have figured things out. I'm going to go see what's out there. You're going out there? Alone? Rina asked, her eyes wide with fear. With the monsters? Izuku gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile, a weak imitation of All Might's. Someone has to. We can't stay here forever. Don't worry. I'll be careful. He left them and headed for the western gate. The fields outside the town, once a cheerful starting zone, now seemed sinister. The frenzied boars that dotted the landscape were no longer tutorial mobs. They were potential murderers. He drew his simple short sword. It felt flimsy in his hand. He had no armor to speak of, just a leather tunic. He thought of his training at UA, of the controlled spars and intense physical conditioning. He had faced villains who could level city blocks. How hard could a pig be? He found one isolated from the rest and approached cautiously, mimicking Aizawa's fighting stance. He analyzed its movements, a simple charge, a telegraph tusk swipe. Okay, predictable pattern, low-level threat. He dodged the first charge easily, his real-world reflexes translating surprisingly well into the game. He countered with a sword slash. The blade connected with the boar's flank, and a spray of red and gold polygons erupted. The boar's HP bar depleted by a sliver. It barely felt the hit. It grunted angrily and charged again. Izuku spent the next 10 minutes in a frustrating dance of dodging and chipping away at the creature's health. It was exhausting. His in-game stamina bar was draining fast. Finally, with one last, desperate stab, the boar squealed and burst into a shower of light, leaving behind a few the in-game currency, and a notification, 10 EXP. He leaned against a tree, panting. A single boar had taken that much effort. How were they supposed to fight a floor boss? How could he possibly protect anyone when he was this weak? The despair he'd been holding at bay threatened to swamp him again. It was then that he heard a scream. A real one. Terrified, his head snapped up. Not far from his position, back towards the town gate, he saw it. Rina. She must have followed him, and now she was cornered against a rocky outcrop by a boar, this one larger, its eyes glowing an angry red. It was an irregular, a stronger variant. Other players nearby were frozen in fear, too scared to intervene. Get away from her! Izuku roared, his fatigue forgotten. He sprinted towards the scene, a burst of adrenaline surging through him. The boar ignored him, lowering its head to charge the terrified girl. There was no time. He wouldn't make it. His sword was too weak, he was too slow. No, the thought was a defiant roar in his mind. I will not let someone die in front of me. He pushed himself harder, channeling every bit of desperation, every ounce of his heroic drive, into this one moment. He remembered All Might's words, the body moves before the mind has a chance to think. He felt a strange energy course through him, hot and electric, like the first time he'd unconsciously tapped into One for All. A brilliant green light, like crackling digital lightning, flickered around his arms. A series of system notifications flashed in the corner of his vision, too fast to read, but he didn't care. He leaped, closing the final distance in an impossible burst of speed. He brought his flimsy sword down in a two-handed arc, pouring all of that newfound energy, all of his will, into the single strike. The sound was not the swing of metal on flesh. It was a deafening crack, like a thunderclap. His sword connected with the boar's head. The creature didn't just dissolve into polygons. It exploded. A shockwave of green data erupted from the point of impact, blowing back grass and dirt. The boar was instantly deleted from existence. Izuku landed, his arms screaming in protest. He looked down at his hands. The simple short sword was gone. In its place were glittering shards of data that quickly faded away. The force of his own blow had completely shattered it. Then, a new sensation hit him. A wave of crushing exhaustion, a deep, system-level pain. He looked at his status. His HP bar, which had been full, had plummeted by half. A series of red, blinking icons appeared under his name. Debuff, System Backlash Severe, minus 80% STR, minus 80% AGI, minus 50% max HP for 10 minutes. His legs gave out, and he fell to one knee, breathing heavily. It felt familiar. It felt exactly like the backlash from using one for all at 100% before he had learned to control it. The broken bones, the searing pain, replaced by a digital, debilitating equivalent. What was that? A player whispered from the sidelines. Did you see that? He one-shot it. Another exclaimed. Izuku ignored them. He pushed himself to his feet and limped over to Rina, who was staring at him with wide, awe-filled eyes. Are you okay? He asked, his voice strained. You're not hurt? She shook her head, speechless. He finally allowed himself to look at the system notifications that had flooded his log. He scrolled back, past the EXP gain and item drops he hadn't even noticed. And there it was, a line of text in shining, golden letters. Congratulations. Unique skill unlocked, Hero's Legacy. He focused on the skill, and a description box appeared. Hero's Legacy, unique skill, a skill that inherits the will and power of those who strive to protect others. Passively stockpiles a minuscule fraction of the total experience data generated by all players on the server. This stockpiled power can be released in active bursts, granting a temporary, massive amplification to the user's core stats. Warning: releasing high percentages of stockpiled power can cause severe system backlash, resulting in temporary stat reduction and HP damage. The greater the power, the greater the cost. Izuku stared at the description, his mind reeling. It was a game mechanic, but it was also. It was one for all. Somehow, in this digital world, the core of his quirk, its very essence, had followed him. A power that grew with the collective efforts of others. A power he could unleash at a great personal cost to perform heroic feats. He looked from the skill description to the terrified faces of the players around him. He looked back at Rina, who was now being comforted by her friends. He looked out at the vast fields, and up towards the impossible castle of Aincrad floating in the blood-red sky. 100 floors, 100 dungeons filled with monsters and traps, standing between them and their lives. Kayaba had created a world of despair, a game where death was real and selfishness was the easiest path to survival. But he had made one critical miscalculation. He had trapped Izuku Midoriya. A quiet determination began to solidify in Izuku's chest, extinguishing the last embers of his fear. The situation was dire. It was terrifying. It was almost hopeless. But he had been given a tool, a power unlike any other in this world. He wasn't All Might's successor here. He wasn't a UA student. But he was still himself. He would not be a lone wolf. He would not hide his power. He would become what these people needed. What All Might had been for his world, he would become for this one. A symbol. He limped back into the town of beginnings, the system backlash debuff making every step an effort. The grim atmosphere hadn't changed, but now, when he looked at the scared and huddled masses, he didn't just see victims. He saw people he had to protect. All of them. He found a quiet alley, sat down with his back against a stone wall, and opened his menu. He ignored the friend requests and messages that were already starting to pop up from the players who had witnessed his feat. He navigated to a simple note-taking feature within the system. He created a new file. He stared at the blank page for a moment, then began to type, his fingers moving with a familiar, mumbling intensity. Title: Hero Analysis for the Future Sword Art Online Volume 1. Entry 1. Game Mechanics and Threats. Kayaba Akihiko, the Game Master, is the villain. His objective is unclear, but the win condition is to clear 100 floors. The loss condition is death. This is not a game. This is a hostage crisis. Every player is a hostage. Entry 2. Observed monster data. Frenzied boar. Attack patterns: linear charge, short-range tusk swipe. Weak points seem to be the flanks and underbelly. Irregular variants exist, identifiable by glowing red eyes. Significantly higher HP and damage output. Avoid until higher level. Entry 3. Unique skill, Hero's Legacy. A manifestation of one for all? It functions on the same principles, stockpiling and explosive release. The backlash is a direct parallel to the physical damage OFA causes. Must be treated with the same caution. Need to experiment with lower percentages to find a manageable output. Is there a full cowling equivalent? Constant low-level release to boost base stats without backlash. Need to test. The skill's growth is tied to the activity of all players. This means teamwork isn't just an option, it's a necessity. The stronger everyone else gets, the stronger I become. My power is literally fueled by their hope and effort. He paused, looking up from his virtual notes. He looked at his own hands. They felt weak and powerless from the debuff, but he knew what they held. A vow formed in his heart, clear and absolute. It wasn't just a promise to a crying girl anymore. It was a promise to all 10,000 souls trapped in this beautiful, deadly cage. I will beat this game, he whispered to the empty alley, his voice raw with emotion and unwavering resolve. I will get stronger. I will figure this world out. And I will save every single person I can. I will get everyone home. I swear it. The road ahead was long and fraught with peril. But for the first time since that terrible announcement, Izuku Midoriya felt not fear, but the familiar, heavy, and yet comforting weight of his purpose. The hero analysis had begun. The work had started. And in the heart of a death game, a new symbol of hope was about to be born. A month in Aincrad was a lifetime. 30 days was long enough for the initial, paralyzing terror to curdle into a grim, gnawing reality. Long enough for the sky to remain an unyielding, bloody crimson. Long enough for the death toll, broadcast with chilling indifference on a monument in the town of beginnings, to climb past 2,000. 2,000 souls, erased by a moment of carelessness, an over-aggressive pull, or the simple, brutal math of a monster's attack power versus a player's hit points. In that month, Izuku Midoriya had not rested. He had adapted. The awe he'd felt for the world of Sao was gone, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a hero on a long-term rescue mission. He spent every waking moment in the fields and forests outside the starting city, not just fighting, but studying. His days were a meticulous, grueling routine. He would engage a frenzied boar, not with the goal of killing it quickly, but of understanding it completely. He'd test the limits of its aggro range, count the frames of its charge animation, and document the exact damage values of his weakest and strongest sword skills. His virtual notebook, now labeled Hero Analysis for the Future SAO Volume 3, was already filled with intricate diagrams of monster attack patterns, color-coded charts of item drop rates, and detailed notes on the local flora that could be crafted into rudimentary healing potions. More than anything, he studied his own power. Hero's legacy was his lifeline, his secret weapon, and his greatest burden. He quickly confirmed his theory. It functioned exactly like One for All. He discovered how to use it in controlled minute bursts. Hero's legacy, 1% activation, he'd mutter, feeling a faint warmth spread through his avatar's limbs. His movements would become crisper, his sword strikes a fraction faster, hitting just a little harder. There was no backlash at this level, only a slow, manageable drain on his stamina. He gave this state a name that felt right, full cowling. It became his default combat stance, a low-level hum of power that gave him an edge over every other player on the floor. He also tested the higher outputs. A 3% burst was a flick, enough to stagger a wolf-type monster. 5% was a smash, capable of shattering the shield of a kobold sentinel. But anything higher came with a cost. The stinging pain of the system backlash debuff was a constant reminder of the price of power. He learned his limits the hard way, more than once finding himself forced to flee a fight with his stats crippled, his HP bar a terrifying sliver of red. His most profound discovery, however, was about the skill's passive nature. It stockpiled power from the EXP generated by all players. This single fact reshaped his entire worldview within Aincrad. Every time a player somewhere on the floor defeated a monster, a microscopic mote of that power was funneled into his own. He was a living battery, charged by the collective effort of everyone in the game. This meant that the cynical, lone wolf mentality adopted by many players was not just morally wrong in his eyes, it was strategically foolish. The more people who survived, the more who leveled up and grew strong, the more powerful his own abilities would become. His heroic instinct to save everyone was now backed by the game's own cold, hard logic. Protecting others was, in the most direct way imaginable, protecting himself and empowering his ability to end the entire death game. This philosophy drove him to action. He didn't hoard information. He shared it freely. posting his monster analyses on the community message boards and leaving tips for new players struggling in the starting fields. He became a familiar sight, a green-haired player who would appear out of nowhere to help a party in trouble, offer a spare healing potion, and then vanish with a quick, encouraging smile before they could properly thank him. He didn't have a reputation as a powerhouse yet. He was careful not to use his high-output smashes where others could see, but he was gaining a name as the most helpful player on the first floor. It was this growing reputation that led him to the amphitheater in the town of Talbana, 1 month to the day after their imprisonment began. The air in the stone coliseum was thick with a mixture of hope and fear. Hundreds of players had gathered, the best and bravest of the frontliners, their armor and weapons glinting in the light of the setting sun. They were here to discuss the unthinkable, a raid on the first-floor boss. Izuku found a spot on the upper tiers, pulling up his simple hood to avoid drawing attention. His gaze swept across the crowd, his analytical mind taking inventory. He saw players clustered in makeshift guilds, their tabards bearing crude, hand-designed emblems. He saw merchants calculating the potential profits from a cleared floor. He saw a loud, brash player with spiky brown hair and a two-handed sword arguing with his guildmates. Izuku's notes identified him as Kibu, a fiercely pragmatic but abrasive leader. His eyes also caught a flicker of movement in the shadows near an exit. A lone player, clad in a dark leather coat, his face obscured. He held himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of immense skill. Izuku recognized the efficient, almost predatory grace of a top-tier solo player. He made a mental note. Then, a player with striking blue hair and knightly armor stepped into the center of the arena. He raised a hand for silence, and the crowd quieted, their attention focused on him. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice clear and charismatic. "My name is Diabel. And like all of you, I want to get the hell out of this game." A roar of approval went up from the crowd. Diabel let it wash over him before continuing. "For the past month, we've been cowering, leveling up in secret, afraid to take the next step. But today, a scouting party found it. The entrance to the boss room." A wave of murmurs spread through the amphitheater. Diabel presented a holographic map, showing the top of the labyrinthine tower they had all been exploring. "Our intel comes from the beta testers who were kind enough to share," he explained, projecting a bestiary image of a towering, red-skinned creature. "The boss is Ilfong the Kobold Lord. He's protected by a squad of ruined kobold sentinels and wields a bone axe and a buckler shield. The beta guide says that at his last health bar, he'll switch his weapon to a curved sword called a tawar." Izuku, listening intently, felt a familiar itch in the back of his mind. He opened his own virtual notebook, cross-referencing Diabel's words with his own compiled data, a collection of rumors, second-hand accounts, and educated guesses he'd assembled from dozens of players. Diabel laid out his strategy. "We'll form 6 parties of 6. The main parties, Alpha and Bravo, will focus on the boss. The other 4 will handle the sentinels. Once the ads are down, we all converge on Ilfong. It's a simple tank and spank. We overwhelm him with numbers. Any questions?" It was a good plan. A solid plan. And it was dangerously flawed. Izuku started mumbling, his voice a low, almost inaudible hum. No, that's not right. The beta information is incomplete. It has to be. A boss's behavior patterns are never that simple. Kayaba wouldn't design it that way. Relying on just 2 parties to tank is too risky. What if the aggro table shifts? And the weapons switch? A tawar is a slashing weapon, but if the sentinels use polearms, there's a weapon triangle at play. But the beta info says nothing about a Nodachi variant which would completely change the attack speed and range and would break the formation, meaning the support parties would be vulnerable and... Hey! You in the green hood! A sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Izuku's head snapped up. It was Kibu, pointing at him from across the arena. "You got something to say, or are you just gonna sit there whispering to yourself like a freak? If you have a problem with the plan, spit it out." Hundreds of eyes turned to him. Izuku's blood ran cold. Public speaking. His one true weakness. He felt his cheeks flush, and he instinctively wanted to shrink back into the shadows. But then he looked at the faces in the crowd, scared, hopeful, trusting. He thought of the 2,000 names on the monument. He couldn't stay silent. Diabel's plan would get people killed. He stood up, his legs feeling a little shaky, and cleared his throat. Sorry, he stammered, pulling down his hood. I think there are a few potential flaws in the strategy. Diabel turned to him, his expression patient but skeptical. Oh? And what might those be, friend? Izuku took a deep breath, picturing himself presenting an analysis to Aizawa-sensei. Facts. Logic. Data. First, he began, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. The beta test only lasted 1 month. It's highly probable that Kayaba Akihiko altered the boss's mechanics for the full release. Relying solely on beta information is a gamble we can't afford. The weapons switch, in particular, is a huge variable. What if it's not a Talwar? What if it's a longer, faster weapon? The tanking formation would be instantly compromised. He pointed to Diabel's holographic map. Second, your plan is too focused on the boss. The ruined Kobold Sentinels are the real threat in the first phase. If even one of them breaks past the support parties and gets to the healers or the main tanks, the entire formation collapses. 6 parties isn't enough. We need at least 8, and we need to change their roles. Diabel raised an eyebrow. Change them? How? We don't just need DPS parties, Izuku explained, the words flowing faster now, his strategic mind taking over completely. We need dedicated support roles beyond just healing. I propose a new structure. Squads Alpha and Bravo remain on the boss. Squads Charlie and Delta are on Sentinel DPS. But we add Squads Echo and Foxtrot. Their only job is crowd control and peeling, pulling individual Sentinels off anyone who draws aggro. Then, we add Squads Golf and Hotel, positioning them in the rear. They are a dedicated reserve and will act as medics, running potions to players who are out of range of the primary healers. He paused, taking another breath. This structure is slower. Our damage output on the boss will be lower initially. But it's safer. It minimizes the risk of a cascade failure. It's built to protect every single player, not just the tanks. We can't afford to lose anyone. Every player that dies is one less person who gets to go home. A silence fell over the amphitheater. The players exchanged uncertain glances. His plan was more complex, more defensive. It went against the aggressive, high-risk, high-reward mentality of most gamers. Kiba scoffed. Protect everyone? This is a boss fight, not a field trip. Your plan is cowardly. We need to hit it hard and fast. A fast death is still a death. Izuku shot back, his voice ringing with conviction. From the shadows, the dark-clad solo player spoke for the first time, his voice calm and level. His logic is sound. All eyes turned to him. The player stepped forward slightly, his face still hard to see. The biggest cause of raid wipes is failed mechanics, not low DPS. His plan accounts for more variables. It's the better strategy. Diabel looked from the lone player to Izuku, then back at his own plan. He was a proud man, but he was not a fool. He had presented himself as the leader they needed, and a true leader listened. All right, Diabel said, letting out a sigh. Your points are well made. We'll use your strategy, Deku. He looked at Izuku with newfound respect. And your command structure. You'll take a position in the center and help me coordinate the squads. Izuku blinked, stunned. And me? You made the plan. You're the best one to see it through, Diabel said with finality, and so it was decided. The air inside the boss room was cold and ancient. A massive stone throne sat at the far end of the circular chamber, and upon it sat Ilfang the Kobold Lord. He was even more intimidating than the pictures, a 10-foot-tall beast of muscle and red fur, a massive bone axe resting on his shoulder. The heavy doors boomed shut behind the 48 players of the raid force, sealing them inside. For a moment, the only sound was the nervous shuffling of feet and the clink of armor. Izuku stood near the center with Diabel, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. The real thing. He activated Hero's Legacy, 1% full cowling, a faint green aura flickering around him, visible only to his own eyes. His senses sharpened, the world coming into clearer focus. All squads, positions! Diabel commanded. Squads Alpha, Bravo, forward! engage the boss. Izuku's voice was steadier than he felt. Charlie, Delta, on my mark, engage the sentinels. Echo, Foxtrot, prepare to peel. Go! The battle began. Diabel and the main tanks charged forward, their shields raised. Ilfang let out a deafening roar and leaped from his throne, his axe swinging in a wide arc that the tanks caught on their shields with a shower of sparks. Simultaneously, a dozen ruined kobold sentinels materialized, charging the raid force. Charlie, Delta, now! Izuku yelled. The DPS squads met the sentinels head-on, a clash of steel and angry snarls. Izuku's eyes were everywhere at once, processing 100 different streams of information. Sentinel at 7 o'clock is targeting a healer. Squad Echo, peel it off. Agile, your HP is dropping. Bravo Squad, defensive formation, watch the tail swipe. It has a 3-second wind-up. He was a natural. All those years of analyzing hero fights, breaking down villains' quirks, and muttering strategies had been the perfect training for this. He saw the battlefield not as a chaotic melee, but as a complex dance of numbers and patterns. His plan was working. The dedicated peeling squads were intercepting rogue sentinels flawlessly, keeping the back lines safe. The reserve squads were efficiently distributing potions, ensuring no one stayed in critical health for long. They were slowly, methodically, winning. Finally, the last sentinel shattered into polygons. All sentinels down! Diabel yelled. All squads, converge on the boss. The remaining parties swarmed Ilfang, a flurry of sword skills lighting up the chamber. The boss's 4 health bars began to drop steadily. One by one, they depleted, green, to yellow, to orange. He's in the red. Last bar. Someone shouted. Get ready for the weapons switch. As if on cue, Ilfang roared and tossed aside his axe and shield. He reached behind his back and drew a new weapon. It wasn't a talwar. It was a massive, curved greatsword, a nodachi. It was longer, heavier, and far more menacing than anything the beta info had suggested. Nodachi variant. His attack patterns are changing. Izuku screamed, his warning coming a fraction of a second too late. Diabel, who had pushed forward, hungry for the glory of the last attack bonus, was caught completely off guard. Ilfang blurred, the nodachi swinging in a vicious, high-speed combo. Diabel managed to block the first 2 strikes, but the third shattered his guard and slashed deep across his chest. His HP bar plummeted instantly into the red. He was thrown backward, paralyzed and helpless. Diabel! A player screamed. Ilfang raised the nodachi for the killing blow, but his attention was diverted. Kibu's party, their leader now gone, had been left exposed. The boss, its aggro switching to the nearest threat, turned on them. They scrambled back, their faces pale with terror. There was no time to think. Izuku's body moved on its own. He saw the panicked faces of Kibu's squad. He saw the descending blade of the nodachi. He saw a dozen lives about to be extinguished. No! The roar was torn from his throat. Hero's legacy, 5%. Full cowling, a powerful surge of green energy erupted from him. He shot forward like a bullet, a verdant comet streaking across the boss room. He arrived in front of Kibu's terrified group an instant before the nodachi did. He didn't have a shield. All he had was his simple long sword. He met the colossal blade with his own. The impact was cataclysmic. A sound like a thunderclap echoed through the chamber, and a shockwave of emerald light blasted outward. Izuku's feet dug trenches in the stone floor as he was pushed back, his arms screaming under the impossible strain. His HP bar dropped by a quarter from the sheer force of the blow, but he held. The nodachi was stopped. Ilfang, enraged, unleashed a furious volley of strikes. Izuku became a blur of desperate motion, a green shield against an unstoppable storm. He parried, blocked, and dodged, his sword glowing with the energy of his skill. Each block sent a tremor through his body and chipped away at his health, but he didn't yield. He was the wall. He would not break. From behind him, Kirito, the dark-clad swordsman, saw his chance. Now! While he's focused! He yelled. He and a hooded player with a rapier, Asuna, burst from the ranks. They became twin whirlwinds of destruction, their blades a blur as they tore into the boss's exposed flank. They unleashed a torrent of high-level sword skills, taking advantage of the massive opening Deku's sacrifice had created. Ilfong roared one last time as Kirito's final sword skill plunged into its chest. The Kobold Lord froze, then shattered into a billion shimmering polygons. A massive "Congratulations" banner filled the room. Silence. Then, a tidal wave of cheers and relieved sobs. They had done it. They had won. Izuku's skill deactivated. The strength fled his body, replaced by an agonizing weakness. His sword clattered to the floor, and he fell to one knee, panting for breath that wouldn't come. The backlash wasn't as severe as his first 100% attempt, but his stats were still crippled. As the celebration began, a grim reality set in. They found Diabel, his body already starting to fade. He offered a weak, sad smile. "You were right, kid. Your plan, it was good. You have to beat this game for all of us." And then he was gone. The joy of their victory was soured by the loss. The tension in the room shifted. He died because of them. A voice shouted. It was one of Kiba's men, pointing a trembling finger at Kirito. The beta testers. They knew the boss's weapon was different. They kept the information to themselves and let Diabel die so they could get the rare items. Kibu, saved moments before by Izuku, now rounded on Kirito, his face contorted with grief and anger. "Is that true? Did you know?" Kirito stood silent, his expression unreadable. Izuku watched, his heart sinking. He knew what was happening. The crowd needed someone to blame, a scapegoat for their fear and sorrow. And Kirito, ever the solo player, ever the loner, decided to give them one. He equipped his reward for the last attack, the coat of midnight. It swirled around him, making him look even more imposing and aloof. "You want to know why I'm so much stronger than you?" he said, his voice cold. "During the beta, I made it to floors none of you could even dream of. I know how to get the best gear, the most EXP. You can't compare me to those other amateurs." He let the words hang in the air. "So go ahead. Don't call me a beta tester. I'm far worse than that. Call me a beater. A beta testing cheater." The crowd recoiled, muttering the new, ugly word. Kirito was drawing all their hatred onto himself, becoming a villain to unite them. It was a noble sacrifice, in its own twisted way, and Izuku would not allow it. He pushed himself to his feet, every muscle protesting, and strode forward, planting himself between Kirito and the angry mob. "Stop it," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. All eyes turned to him. "This is pointless," Izuku said, looking around at the faces of the raid party, the people he had fought to protect. "Blaming him, blaming any beta tester, is illogical and it's wrong. Diabel made a choice. He was brave, and he made a mistake. That's all. It happens in battle." He turned to Kibu. "A moment ago, that boss was about to kill you and your entire party. Kirito didn't stand back and let it happen. He fought, and I saw at least a half-dozen other beta testers in this raid, fighting just as hard as everyone else. Are they all cheaters too?" He then addressed the entire group, his voice rising with passion. "Being a beta tester isn't a crime. It just means they had access to information. Information we should all be sharing. The enemy isn't each other. The enemy is Kayaba Akihiko and the 100 floors above our heads. Fighting amongst ourselves is exactly what he wants." He gestured to Kirito. "This player used his skill to help end the fight. I used my skills to protect others. Asuna, Agile, all of you, we all fought together. That is the only reason we are standing here right now." The anger in the crowd began to cool, replaced by shame and understanding. They looked away from Kirito, their accusations dying on their lips. Izuku stood tall, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten, and gave them the one thing they needed more than a scapegoat: hope. "We lost a good leader today," he said, his voice softening. "And we should mourn him. But we also achieved something incredible. We beat the first floor. We proved that this game can be beaten. We proved that if we trust each other, if we share what we know and protect the person standing next to us, we can climb this tower, all the way to the top." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of as many players as he could. He saw their fear, but now, he also saw a spark of defiance. "My name is Deku. And I promise all of you, I will not rest until every single one of us gets to go home. We survived today, and we will survive tomorrow. We're going to win this. Together. He balled his hand into a fist, a gesture of pure, unshakable resolve. Plus ultra. A single player started clapping. Then another. Soon, the entire chamber was filled with applause. They weren't cheering for a victory over a monster. They were cheering for an idea. For him. In the back of the room, Kirito watched, his plan to become a pariah completely dismantled. He saw the crowd looking at Deku not with fear or suspicion, but with admiration. With hope. He had tried to become a villain to unite them, but this strange, green-haired kid had done the impossible. He had become a hero. As the raid party began to file out of the boss room, their spirits lifted. Kirito found himself standing near Deku. You didn't have to do that, Kirito said quietly. Letting them hate me would have been easier. Maybe, Deku replied, giving him a tired but genuine smile. But a hero's job is to save people. And that includes saving them from themselves. He offered a hand. I'm Deku. Kirito looked at the offered hand, then at the earnest, freckled face of the player who had just turned the game on its head. He hesitated for a second before shaking it. Kirito. Two paths had diverged in that boss room. One, the path of the lone black swordsman, who sought strength to survive in the shadows, and the other, the path of a boy who, even in a world of death and despair, could not help but try to save everyone. This was the night he stopped being just another player. This was the night he truly became Aincrad's Emerald Hope. 6 months had passed since the sky first bled crimson. 6 months of waking up in a digital world that had become more real than memory. In that time, the floating castle of Aincrad had transformed. It was no longer just a prison. It was a nation, a society forged in the crucible of a death game. Markets thrived in safe zones, blacksmiths became celebrities, and powerful guilds like the Knights of the Blood Oath and the Aincrad Liberation Force began to carve out their own domains, their banners a common sight on the ever-expanding front lines. They had cleared 34 floors. 34 brutal, hard-won victories, each one pushing the ceiling of their world a little higher, each one costing them friends, comrades, and pieces of their own hope. And through it all, one name had risen above the rest. Not a guild leader, nor a reclusive powerhouse, but a symbol. A player spoken of in hushed, reverent tones in the taverns of Taft and the plazas of Urbis. They called him the Emerald Hope. Izuku Deku Midoriya was now level 58. The nervous, stammering boy who had entered the game was still there, buried beneath layers of hard-earned confidence. He had become a leader not by seeking power, but by offering help. He had never formed a proper guild, with its rigid hierarchies and mandatory dues. Instead, he had fostered a community, a loose network of players connected through a shared message board and a common ideal. They called themselves the Hopeful Front, and their mission was simple: leave no one behind. Their activities were the lifeblood of the lower and middle floors. They ran escort missions for merchants and low-level players through dangerous territory. They organized rescue parties to retrieve players trapped in dungeons. Most importantly, they operated the most comprehensive information network in Aincrad, a repository of Deku's meticulous analysis, freely available to all. His detailed boss strategies, his monster weakness charts, his guides to hidden quests, they had saved countless lives and had become the foundation upon which the frontline guilds built their assault parties. Today's mission was a routine one, escorting a trio of younger players, a tailor named Lisha, a timid alchemist named Ren, and his boisterous spear-wielding friend, Taro, through the whispering woods of floor 35. They needed to gather a rare reagent, moonpetal moss, which only grew in a secluded grove deep within the forest. Are you sure we're going the right way, Deku-san? Ren asked, his voice barely a whisper. He clutched his satchel of empty vials as if it were a shield. The woods were unnerving, a maze of colossal, moss-covered trees under a perpetually twilight canopy. The air was cool and damp, filled with the unsettling sound of leaves rustling when there was no wind. Positive, Izuku said, his tone calm and reassuring. He moved at the head of their small formation, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, the wind-vane blade. His eyes, glowing with the faint, internal light of his 1% full cowling, scanned every shadow, every rustling bush. His perception stat, boosted by his continuous low-level skill usage, was preternaturally high. My map is updated. The grove is just past this ridge. Stay close. Nothing to worry about when the Emerald Hope is with us. Taro boomed, trying to sound braver than he felt. I heard you once held off a mini-boss for 10 minutes straight all by yourself. Izuku offered a small, slightly embarrassed smile over his shoulder. It wasn't quite that long. And I had help. The stories of his exploits had a tendency to grow with each telling. He didn't mind. If the legends gave people courage, they served a purpose. It's not the monsters I'm worried about, Lisha said, her voice tight with anxiety. She was a crafter, unaccustomed to the dangers outside the safe zone. I heard they've been seen on this floor. Izuku's smile faded. He knew exactly who they were. A shadow that had begun to stretch across Aincrad. A guild with a grinning skull for an emblem. Laughing Coffin, Taro spat the name like a curse. Player killers. Scum who think this is all still just a game. They are a threat, Izuku acknowledged, his expression hardening. But they tend to prey on solo players or small, weak groups. As long as we stick together and stay alert, we'll be fine. His words were meant to be comforting, but a cold knot of dread was tightening in his own stomach. He had studied them, of course. From the fragmented accounts of survivors, he had pieced together a terrifying profile. They were not common bandits. They were organized, sadistic, and they enjoyed the power that came from holding another player's real life in their hands. They were, in every sense of the word, villains. He had never encountered them himself. His reputation usually kept them at bay. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that a confrontation was inevitable. His entire philosophy, to save everyone, was a direct challenge to their creed of preying on the weak. They reached the grove without incident. It was a beautiful, serene clearing where ethereal blue moss pulsed with a soft, gentle light on the bark of an ancient tree. As Ren and Lisha began carefully harvesting the moss, Izuku and Taro stood guard, back to back, their senses on high alert. It's too quiet, Izuku murmured, his eyes sweeping the perimeter. The normal ambient sounds of the forest, the chirping of digital insects, the rustling of small creature mobs, had fallen silent. It was a classic sign of an ambush. Taro, get them back, Izuku ordered, his voice low and urgent. Now. Taro didn't question him. Ren, Lisha, pack it up. We're leaving, but it was too late. From the shadows beneath the dense canopy, figures emerged, their player cursors a hostile, blood red. There were 5 of them, all clad in ragged, dark cloaks, their faces obscured by grinning skull masks. The emblem of Laughing Coffin was emblazoned on their chests. A red status icon appeared in the corner of Izuku's vision, paralysis. He looked down. His boots were stuck fast to the ground, held by a shimmering, purple snare trap that had activated beneath his feet. The leader of the Pika group stepped forward, a cruel-looking jagged dagger in his hand. His player name, Grim, hovered above his head. Well, what do we have here? Grim chuckled, a distorted, metallic sound filtered through his mask. A little lamb, a loud-mouthed sheep, a scared little mouse, and the big, bad shepherd himself. The Emerald Hope. This is a surprise. Let them go, Izuku said, his voice dangerously level as he struggled against the paralysis. Your business is with me. Oh, it will be, Grim sneered. But first, a little lesson. See, we've been hearing all about you, hero. About how everyone can be saved. How we should all work together. It's a nice little fairy tale. But Aincrad isn't a fairy tale. It's a jungle. And in the jungle, the strong eat the weak. 2 of the pikers lunged, not at Izuku, but at Taro. Taro, brave but outmatched, raised his spear, but the pikers were a whirlwind of coordinated strikes. One shattered his guard while the other landed a deep slash across his back, inflicting a bleed debuff. Taro cried out and stumbled, his health bar dropping alarmingly. Ren and Lisha screamed, huddling together behind the tree. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm of fury and helplessness. The paralysis was strong. It would be another 10 seconds before he could break free. 10 seconds that his companions didn't have. You see, hero? Grim taunted, taking a slow, deliberate step towards the cowering alchemist and tailor. your ideals are worthless here. Strength is the only thing that matters. The power to take what you want. The power to decide who lives, and who dies. He raised his dagger, its edge glinting. And we want their items. And their lives. This was the moment. The clash of ideologies made terrifyingly real. Izuku's mind, a supercomputer of heroic analysis, raced through 1,000 scenarios. He thought of Yue, of the provisional license exam, of All Might's unwavering smile. He was a hero. And heroes had rules. They didn't kill. They subdued. They captured. They saved. But this wasn't Mizurufu. There were no police to call, no prison to hold them. The game's mechanics offered only one permanent solution to a threat like this, reducing their HP to 0. Killing them. It was the logical choice. The efficient choice. The choice any other top player, Kirito, Asuna, even Kibu, would make without a second thought to protect innocent lives. Grim was right in front of Ren and Lisha now, his dagger poised over the terrified girl's throat. Ren, in a fit of desperate courage, threw himself in front of her, shielding her with his own body. "Kill us, hero," Grim whispered, his voice a venomous hiss directed at Izuku. "Go on. Strike us down. Prove that in the end, you're just like us. Or watch them die." The paralysis trap flickered and died. Izuku was free. In that split second of freedom, a profound clarity washed over him. He could unleash a 50% smash and obliterate them all in an instant. It would be easy, and it would be a betrayal of everything he was, everything he aspired to be. All Might didn't just win, he saved. He saved people's lives, and he saved their hearts. Killing these players, even these villains, would be a failure. It would mean that Kayaba's twisted world had broken him. No, he would not break. He would not kill. He would win. His way. Hero's legacy, 15% activation, he whispered. The world exploded in emerald light. It was not the gentle hum of his full cowling. This was a torrent, a tidal wave of raw power flooding his system. Green lightning, far more intense than any sword skill effect, crackled around his body, kicking up leaves and dust. His HP bar took a small but noticeable dip from the initial strain. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't need to. He took one step forward, planting his foot firmly on the ground, and drew his right fist back. It was a familiar stance, a posture ingrained in his very soul. He wasn't just a swordsman, he was the ninth wielder of One for All. You want to see what real strength is? Izuku's voice was no longer the calm reassurance of a guide. It was a low, powerful growl that seemed to shake the very air. It isn't about taking lives. It's about protecting them. He thrust his fist forward, stopping a foot short of Grim's masked face. Detroit. Smash! He didn't punch Grim. He punched the air in front of him. The result was annihilation. A cannon blast of pure, kinetic force erupted from his fist. It wasn't an elemental attack. It was a physical phenomenon, a concussive wave of pressure so immense it distorted the very fabric of the game world. The air itself seemed to shatter. Grim and the 4 other Laughing Coffin members were hit by a solid wall of invisible power. Their attack animations froze. Their HP bars, while not depleting significantly from the initial blow, were instantly irrelevant. The true damage was to their equipment. A series of sickening crunch sounds, like digital glass breaking, echoed through the grove. The pikers' cloaks, their leather armor, their jagged daggers and cruel-looking swords, every piece of gear they wore fractured, then disintegrated into a shower of glittering, red polygons. System notifications for equipment durability 0 and item broken would be flooding their vision. Their avatars, now stripped down to basic starting clothes, were flung backward like ragdolls, tumbling through the air for 30 feet before crashing into the massive trees with enough force to momentarily stun them. Their stats, stripped of all equipment bonuses, plummeted to pathetic levels. In a single, non-lethal blow, he had utterly and completely disarmed and incapacitated them. The clearing fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the whimpering of the defeated pikers. Taro, Rin, and Lisha stared, their mouths agape, at the raw, overwhelming power they had just witnessed. This wasn't a sword skill. It wasn't something you could learn. This was something else entirely. Izuku stood in the center of the clearing, his fist still extended, green lightning flickering and dying around him. The backlash hit him a moment later. A wave of weakness, a system backlash, moderate, debuff that temporarily cut his agility and strength by 30%. He gritted his teeth against the familiar, draining sensation. It was a price he was more than willing to pay. He walked calmly over to the groaning, defeated pikers. Grim looked up at him from the base of a tree, his mask cracked, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. How? He stammered. What was that? That's not a skill. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible, Izuku said, his voice now calm again. He pulled a set of 5 small vials from his pouch. Paralysis potions. You're right about one thing. This isn't a game, which means actions have consequences. He administered a potion to each of them, their bodies going rigid as the effect took hold. They were helpless, defeated, and alive. He turned back to his charges. Are you all okay? Taro, clutching his wounded side, could only nod, his eyes filled with awe. Deku-san, you? He saved us, Lisha whispered, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear, but of profound, overwhelming relief. Izuku helped Taro to his feet and gave her a healing potion to administer. Let's get the rest of that moss and get back to town. You're not safe here. He contacted the Aincrad Liberation Force through his message system, sending the coordinates of the paralyzed pikers. The ALF, while primarily a frontline clearing guild, had recently established a small, informal security division to police the safe zones. They had built a makeshift prison, a heavily guarded room in their headquarters where they could hold paralyzed players until the effect wore off, keeping them on a rotating schedule of paralysis and containment. It was a flawed, temporary solution, but it was the best they had. It was a system Izuku himself had proposed. By the time they returned to the bustling town on floor 35, the story had already begun to spread, transmitted by a handful of other players who had witnessed the confrontation from a safe distance. It spread like wildfire through the player base, from the front lines to the town of beginnings. The stories of Deku's strength and kindness were well known. But this was different. This was a legend being forged in real time. He hadn't just defeated a squad of the infamous Laughing Coffin. He had done it without killing them. In a world where the line between justice and vengeance was hopelessly blurred, he had refused to cross it. He had faced down the ugliest aspect of their new reality, and had not compromised his ideals. He had proven, in the most spectacular way imaginable, that you did not have to become a monster to fight them. That evening, sitting at a table in a crowded tavern, Izuku listened to the buzz of conversation around him. Shattered their gear with a single blow. Didn't even use a sword. They say he was surrounded, protecting a group of lobies. Called it a Detroit smash. What kind of skill is that? The Emerald Hope doesn't kill. He saves. He even saved those piker scumbags from themselves. He looked into his mug of water, his reflection showing a tired but determined boy. The backlash from the 15% activation still lingered, a dull ache in his avatar's muscles. He knew what he had done today. He had painted a massive target on his back. Poe, the charismatic, nihilistic leader of Laughing Coffin, would hear of this. He would see Deku not just as an obstacle, but as a direct philosophical challenge to his entire worldview. Their conflict was no longer a matter of if, but when. But as he looked around the tavern, he saw something in the faces of the other players that he hadn't seen in a long time. The fear was still there, lurking in their eyes, but it was overshadowed by something else. A renewed spark of courage. A defiant glimmer of hope. He had shown them that there was a different way. A better way. He had given them more than just a victory. He had given them a standard to believe in. The title had been bestowed upon him months ago. But it was in the twilight of the Whispering Woods, with a non-lethal declaration of power, that Izuku Midoriya truly earned it. He was the Emerald Hope, a symbol of unwavering heroism in a world that desperately needed one. And his fight was only just beginning. The front line had pushed its way to floor 47, a land of vibrant, oversized flora and crystalline rivers. For many it was a welcome respite from the grim, dungeon-heavy floors that had preceded it. For Lisbeth, Aincrad's most sought-after blacksmith, it was a source of immense frustration. I'm telling you, Deku, It's the only thing that will work," she exclaimed, her pink hair tied back as she gestured emphatically at a complex schematic projected from her workshop menu. "To forge a blade that can withstand the kind of force you put out, I need a catalyst. Something that can bind the crystalline ingot to the dragon's hide hilt. I need Heartstone, Oregon." Izuku Midoriya leaned over the anvil in her bustling workshop, studying the design. His own sword, the Windvane blade, lay on a nearby rack, its edge showing the telltale signs of microfractures. It was his third custom blade from Lisbeth, and like the others, it was slowly succumbing to the strain of channeling even low-percentage bursts of Hero's Legacy. "And this Heartstone, or," he mumbled, his analytical mind kicking in, "it's only found in one place, right? The labyrinth of shifting shadows on floor 48? Bingo," Lisbeth said, wiping a bit of virtual soot from her cheek. "And it's a nightmare. A solo player's graveyard. The walls move, the traps are randomized, and the whole place is designed to split up parties. No one's managed to map it properly. Most people who go in looking for treasure just end up with a huge repair bill and a teleport crystal receipt." Izuku's expression firmed with resolve. "If that's what you need to make a sword that can help me protect people, then that's where I'm going. Just be careful, Deku," she warned, her usual fiery demeanor softening with genuine concern. "Your reputation is a double-edged sword. It keeps a lot of the riffraff away, but it also makes you a prime target for anyone looking to make a name for themselves. Don't go alone." "I won't," he promised, though he knew finding a partner for such a specialized, dangerous run would be difficult. "I'll be back soon, Lisbeth-san." "Thank you." Floor 48 was a stark contrast to the one below. It was a place of perpetual twilight, a floating island of black, basalt rock under a sky filled with dim, pulsing stars. The entrance to the labyrinth of shifting shadows was a gaping maw in the side of a mountain, ringed with ominous, faintly glowing runes. As Izuku approached, activating his 1% full cowling more out of habit than immediate need, he saw another figure standing before the entrance, studying it with an intensity that matched his own. The player was clad head to toe in black, a simple, high-quality leather coat swirling around him. A magnificent one-handed sword with an obsidian gleam, the Elucidator, was strapped to his back. It was Kirito, the Black Swordsman. The Beater. In the 7 months since the first floor boss raid, their paths had rarely crossed. Izuku operated in the open, a public figure coordinating a massive support network. Kirito moved through the shadows, a solo player of almost mythical prowess who would appear on the front lines for a crucial boss fight before melting away again. There were two sides of the same coin, Aincrad's most powerful players, each walking a solitary path dictated by their own deeply held convictions. "Kirito-kun," Izuku said, his voice echoing slightly in the oppressive silence. Kirito turned, his dark eyes showing a flicker of surprise before settling into their usual neutral mask. "Deku. Didn't expect to see you here. This isn't exactly a place for escort missions. I'm here for a crafting material," Izuku explained, gesturing towards the labyrinth. "Heartstone, Oregon. A friend needs it." A muscle in Kirito's jaw twitched. "So am I." He looked back at the entrance. "I need it to reinforce my Elucidator. It's the only mineral with a high enough resonance index." Of course. It made perfect sense that the game's top solo player would be seeking a material to upgrade his signature weapon in a dungeon notorious for punishing groups. Izuku saw the opportunity immediately. "Then we should go in together," he suggested, his tone earnest. "The labyrinth is designed to split up parties, but if it's just two of us, we can use that to our advantage. We can cover more ground, communicate our findings, and watch each other's backs." Kirito was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the shifting runes above the door. His entire career in SAO was built on a single, painful lesson: party members were a liability. A weakness, a vulnerability he couldn't afford. Sachi's face flashed in his memory, her last, heartbreaking words echoing in the silence. "No, thank you," he said finally, his voice polite but firm. "I work better alone." Without another word he drew his sword and stepped through the shimmering portal of the labyrinth's entrance, vanishing into the darkness. Izuku sighed. He had expected as much. Still, it was disappointing. He took a deep breath, reviewed his mental notes on what little was known about the dungeon, and followed him in. The inside was a disorienting maze of identical-looking basalt corridors. The very air seemed to hum with a low, magical energy. As Lisbeth had warned, the layout was not static. As Izuku watched, a wall 50 feet ahead of him dissolved into shadow, only to reform behind him, closing off his exit. This place was actively hostile. He spent the first hour moving with methodical slowness. He wasn't trying to find the ore. He was trying to understand the system. He made meticulous notes in his virtual menu, timing the shifts of the walls, marking the positions of pressure plate traps, and analyzing the patrol patterns of the shadow stalkers, lanky, four-armed beasts made of solidified darkness that could melt into the walls. His approach was that of a strategist, a scientist dissecting a problem. In the distance, he would occasionally hear the sharp clang of steel and the shower of polygons. Kirito. His approach was the polar opposite. He was a force of nature, a blur of black moving through the maze with blinding speed. He wasn't analyzing the traps, he was reacting to them, his reflexes honed to a razor's edge, allowing him to dodge, parry, and sprint through dangers that would have killed a lesser player. Their paths finally converged in a large, circular chamber at what felt like the heart of the labyrinth. In the exact center of the room, embedded in a crystalline formation, was a vein of shimmering crimson ore that pulsed with a soft, warm light. The Heartstone. Izuku entered from a northern corridor just as Kirito sped in from the west. They both saw the ore, and then each other. An awkward tension filled the air. Looks like we had the same idea about the central chamber being the logical endpoint, Izuku said, trying to break the silence. Looks like it, Kirito replied, his eyes fixed on the prize. He took a step forward. Wait, Izuku cautioned, his eyes scanning the floor. The entire floor is a pressure plate. Look at the seams. And the runes on the wall, they aren't decorative. It's a sequence lock. This is the final trap. Kirito paused, his instincts telling him Deku was right. He was the better fighter, but Deku was the better analyst. It was an undeniable fact. What's your read? It's designed for a single person, Izuku mumbled, his gaze distant as he processed the information. The weight of one player on the central dais will activate the lock. But if another player is in the room, the countermeasures will be severe. Before Kirito could process the warning, he acted. His solo player mindset took over. If it was a solo trap, then he, the solo player, should handle it. He used his sprinting skill to dash forward, aiming to get on the dais, trigger the lock, and deal with whatever came next before Deku could get involved. He was fast. But the trap was faster. The instant his boot touched the edge of the central platform, the entire room flashed red. A deafening grinding sound echoed as a solid slab of enchanted stones slammed down, sealing the only exit. Simultaneously, vents in the ceiling hissed open, and a thick, viscous, green sludge began to pour into the chamber. It sizzled as it touched the stone floor, releasing a noxious digital vapor. A red icon appeared on both their HUDs: debuff, acidic corrosion. A secondary notification popped up: equipment durability is decreasing. It's a pincer trap, Izuku yelled, his analytical calm finally breaking. It seals you in and floods the room. The goal isn't to kill us with damage, it's to destroy our gear until we're helpless. Kirito swore, striking the stone door with his elucidator. The blade rebounded with a loud clang, leaving not even a scratch. A notification appeared: immune to physical damage. Smashing it won't work. Deku confirmed, already running to the walls, his eyes scanning the runes Kirito had ignored. It's a puzzle, Kirito-kun. We have to solve it. The green slime was already ankle-deep, and the ominous hiss of their armor corroding was a constant, nerve-wracking sound. Kirito's black coat was already showing signs of fraying at the hem. Here! Deku shouted, pointing to a set of runes. This is a sequence. But it's incomplete. There must be a trigger. He looked at the dais where Kirito was now standing, trapped by the rising sludge. You, on the platform. Do you see another set of runes on the wall in front of you? Yeah, they just lit up. Kirito confirmed, his eyes darting between the runes and the rapidly rising slime, which was now up to his knees. It's a call and response lock. Izuku pieced it together with a surge of insight. One person has to stand on the dais to reveal the sequence, and the other person has to strike the corresponding runes on the outer wall in the correct order. We can't do it alone. The irony was crushing. A trap in a solo player's graveyard that was impossible to solve alone. What's the sequence? Izuku yelled, drawing his wind vane blade. Kirito called out the first 3 runes: a bird, a crescent moon, a sword. Izuku moved with blinding speed, striking the matching symbols on the wall. They glowed with a satisfying chime. It's working! Kirito shouted. Next sequence: sun, star, shield, river. As Deku moved to strike the next set, the slime began to bubble and churn. From the viscous pools, grotesque slime golems began to form, their bodies amorphous and their red, glowing cores signifying their hostile intent. We've got company! Kirito yelled, drawing his own blade to fend off a golem that was trying to climb the dais. I'll handle them! Izuku shouted, his priorities shifting in an instant. Just call out the sequences. Don't let them interrupt you. He abandoned the puzzle and threw himself between the newly formed monsters and Kirito's position. This was his element. This was his purpose. He became a shield. A wall of green and silver against a tide of disgusting green. Hero's Legacy, 3% activation. He commanded. A gentle pulse of power augmented his full cowling. He met the first golem's lashing tendril with his sword, the impact sending a shudder up his arm. The creature's acid splattered against his chest plate, and he heard an alarming sizzle as his durability ticked down even faster. Tree, mountain, serpent! Kirito yelled, fending off another monster. Deku, hearing the call, disengaged from his fight, spun around, and used a quick sword skill to strike the 3 runes before immediately turning back to intercept another golem. He was fighting a 2-front war, one against the monsters and one against the puzzle. Kirito watched in stunned silence for a split second. Deku wasn't just defending. He was defending him. Every move Deku made was calculated to keep the monsters away from the dais, to keep Kirito safe so he could focus on his part of the puzzle. He saw Deku take a heavy blow from a golem's fist that was clearly aimed at him. The green-haired player grunted in pain, his HP dropping, but he didn't yield an inch of ground. He just planted his feet and held the line. The image was so stark, so contrary to Kirito's entire philosophy. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was reckless. It was heroic. Sachi's face flashed in his mind again. He had tried to be a shield for his friends, and his strength had failed. He had concluded that relying on others, or having them rely on him, was the path to ruin. But here was Deku, willingly taking damage, sacrificing his own resources, for someone who had explicitly rejected his offer of partnership just an hour before. Shame and a strange, unfamiliar flicker of admiration burned in Kirito's chest. He shook off his hesitation. Deku, switch with me. He yelled. What? I'm faster. I can hit the runes and get back to the dais before they can swarm it. You're a better defender. Hold the center. Go! There was no time to argue. Trusting Kirito's judgment, Izuku leaped onto the central platform just as Kirito leaped off. The roles were reversed. Now Izuku stood on the high ground, calling out the sequences while fending off the monsters trying to climb up, his defensive style perfectly suited for holding a fixed position. Kirito, meanwhile, became a black blur, his elucidator flashing as he weaved between monsters, striking runes with impossible speed and precision. They fell into a perfect, deadly rhythm. Lightning, crown, beast! Izuku would yell, parrying a golem's attack. Whoosh! Kirito would dash past, striking the 3 runes in less than a second before returning to cut down a monster that was getting too close. They were a seamless unit. The unstoppable offense, and the immovable defense. The black swordsman and the green shield. Last one! Izuku shouted as the slime reached their chests. It's just 1 rune. The heart. Kirito saw it on the far side of the room. He took a deep breath and activated his ultimate sword skill. He became a streak of light, rocketing across the chamber, his blade aimed at the final rune. He struck it true. The rune flared with a brilliant white light. A deep groan echoed through the chamber, as the massive stone door began to retract. The vents in the ceiling slammed shut, and drains opened in the floor, the corrosive slime vanishing with a loud sucking sound. The remaining slime golems dissolved into nothing. They had done it. They both collapsed against the wall of the now empty chamber, panting heavily, the silence punctuated only by the drip of residual slime. They looked at their gear. Kirito's coat of midnight was severely damaged, its defensive stats halved. Izuku's chestplate was cracked, and his wind vane blade had a nasty, corrosive scoring mark down its length. They were alive, but they had paid a price. We should find a safe spot, Izuku managed to say, his voice ragged. To repair. Kirito just nodded, too exhausted to speak. They mined the heartstone ore in silence, the crimson crystal giving off a gentle warmth as they stored it in their inventories. A quick search revealed a hidden passage behind the main dais, a small, circular room untouched by the labyrinth's shifting nature. A designated safe zone. A single, unlit campfire pit sat in the center. With a simple command they lit it, the crackling of the digital flames a welcome, comforting sound. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the tension returning now that the life-or-death struggle was over. They wordlessly took out whetstones and repair kits and began the tedious process of fixing their damaged equipment. It was Kirito who finally broke the silence, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't look up from the whetstone he was slowly drawing along the edge of his elucidator. Why? Izuku paused his own repairs. Why what? Back there, Kirito clarified, his voice tight. You took hits that were meant for me. 3 by my count. Your chest plate is almost broken because of it. It was inefficient. You could have just dodged and let me handle it. Izuku looked into the fire, the flames dancing in his green eyes. He thought for a long moment before answering. You were focusing on the puzzle. My job, at that moment, was to make sure you could do that without interruption. It's just what a hero does. You protect people. It's not about efficiency. Kirito stopped sharpening his blade. He looked up, his dark eyes searching Deku's face for any sign of arrogance or condescension, but found only sincerity. That simple, unwavering answer seemed to break something open inside him. The wall he had so carefully built around his heart, brick by painful brick, finally cracked. A hero. Kirito repeated the word, his voice barely a whisper, laced with a bitterness that was months old. I tried that once. I was the strongest person in my guild. The Moonlit Black Cats. Izuku listened, recognizing the name of the guild that had been famously wiped out in a dungeon trap nearly a year ago. I thought I was strong enough to protect them all by myself, Kirito continued, his gaze lost in the fire, reliving the nightmare. So I kept my real level a secret. I was arrogant. I let them walk into a room they weren't ready for. And they died. All of them. Because of me. Because I tried to be their shield, and I failed. His voice broke on the last few words. He clenched his fist, his knuckles white. After that, I swore I'd never join another party. I'd get strong on my own, so strong that I'd never have to feel that helpless again. So strong I wouldn't need anyone. Because relying on people, having them rely on you, that's how you get them killed. The confession hung in the small room, raw and painful. Izuku finally understood the reason for Kirito's isolation, the profound trauma that had forged the Black Swordsman. Deku set down his sword. I know what that guilt feels like, he said softly. Kirito's eyes flickered up, surprised. I wasn't born with my power, Izuku said, choosing his words carefully, translating his real-world experience into a metaphor Kirito could understand. It was given to me. Inherited. By someone I admire more than anyone. And for the longest time, I felt like I didn't deserve it. Every time I failed, every time someone got hurt who I was trying to protect, I felt that crushing weight. The feeling that if I were just a little stronger, a little faster, a little smarter, I could have saved them. He clenched his own fist, mirroring Kirito's gesture. But the person who gave me this power, the greatest hero I know, he told me something once. He told me that even he couldn't save everyone, that there are always limits. A hero's job isn't to be perfect or to never fail. Their job is to try. To look at a terrifying situation, to look fear right in the face, and still be able to say, it's fine now. Why? Because I am here. He looked directly at Kirito, his green eyes shining with an incredible, unshakable conviction. Even if you're scared. Even if you think you might lose. Even if you can't save everyone, you still have to save the person right in front of you. That's all we can do, Kirito-kun. It's the only thing we can do. Kirito stared at him, speechless. Deku's words didn't absolve him of his guilt. They didn't erase the memory of Sachi's face. But they offered something he hadn't had in a very long time, a different path. A way forward that wasn't paved with lonely, self-punishing strength. A philosophy where trying, and not just succeeding, was the victory. A small, sad smile touched Kirito's lips. The Emerald Hope. I guess you really are the real deal. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere in the room lifted, replaced by a quiet, mutual understanding. They finished their repairs in comfortable silence. The ore, Kirito said, opening his menu. We should split it. He initiated a trade. Actually, Deku countered, the blacksmith I'm bringing this to is the best in Aincrad. Lisbeth. I'm sure if we give her the whole vein, she could craft or reinforce something for both of us. Kirito considered it, then nodded. All right. It was a small gesture, but for him, it was monumental. An admission that he didn't have to do everything by himself. They left the labyrinth of shifting shadows side by side. The twilight of floor 48 didn't seem quite so oppressive anymore. They had entered the dungeon as rivals, a swordsman defined by his past and a symbol striving for the future. They left as something else entirely. Something closer to friends. The shield had protected the sword, and in doing so, had shown it that it didn't always have to fight alone. On the 55th floor of Aincrad, in the gleaming, white-marbled city of Grandam, stood the headquarters of the Knights of the Blood Oath. It was less a guild hall and more a fortress, a testament to the Cobb's status as the undisputed top-clearing guild in the game. Their crisp, white and red tabards were a symbol of strength, discipline, and uncompromising efficiency. They were the tip of the spear, the engine driving humanity's ascent through Kaiba's prison, and at the very point of that spear was their vice-commander, Asuna. Known throughout Aincrad as the Flash, her rapier, the lambent light, moved with a speed that defied the game's system mechanics. She was a whirlwind of precision and lethality, a duelist of unparalleled skill. But the weight of her position was a heavy one. Life in the Cobb was a relentless cycle of strategy meetings, resource management, and high-stakes frontline combat. Every decision was measured in percentages and probabilities, every player a resource to be deployed, every battle a problem to be solved with cold, hard logic. The joy she had once found in the game was a distant memory, replaced by the grim, crushing responsibility of her command. This responsibility felt particularly heavy today. The raid force for the 55th floor boss, a colossal, six-armed golem named the Fulminated Adamant, had been wiped out. Twice. It wasn't a matter of strength. The Cobb had the highest level players and the best equipment in Aincrad. It was a matter of mechanics. The golem had a complex, multi-phase defense system that required flawless, large-scale coordination on a level they had never before encountered. In its first phase, it was immune to all physical damage until 6 specific runes on its body were struck simultaneously. This required 6 different parties to coordinate their attacks down to the exact millisecond, a task that proved nearly impossible amidst the chaos of its area of effect stomp attacks. The second phase was even worse. The golem would begin to channel a room-wide insta-kill attack, which could only be interrupted by inputting a sequence of strikes, thrust/vertical/thrust, on 6 different crystals that activated randomly around the vast boss chamber. A single mistake in the sequence, or a single missed crystal, and the raid was over. Asuna slammed her gauntlet fist on the polished oak table in the Cobb strategy room. The holographic projection of the golem flickered. It's a synchronization nightmare, she said, her voice tight with frustration. The communication lag, even for a millisecond, is enough to throw off the timing on the runes, and the crystal phase is pure chaos. We can't assign parties to a specific location when the crystals activate randomly. By the time we call out a target, it's too late. Godfrey, a hulking tank and one of the Cobb's top officers, crossed his massive arms. Our DPS is more than enough to burn it down, Commander. We just can't get past the damned gimmicks. Then we need a new strategy, a calm, authoritative voice said from the head of the table. Commander Heathcliff, the leader of the Cobb, sat with his hands steepled, his unique tower shield and sword a symbol of his legendary status as the man who had held the front lines against impossible odds. His expression was, as always, unreadable. Our current approach is a brute force application that is failing, he continued, his voice even. What we lack is not power, but a more elegant solution. Asuna felt a flush of irritation. Heathcliff's serene confidence was sometimes more grating than helpful. He offered diagnoses, but rarely solutions, preferring to let his subordinates handle the tactical details. The pressure always fell on her. With all due respect, Commander, she said, her tone sharp, elegance doesn't win boss fights. Perfect execution does, and we are not a hive mind. Perhaps not, Heathcliff said, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. But there are some in Aincrad who see the battlefield with a clarity that approaches it. The boy they call the Emerald Hope, for example. His analysis of the 38th floor boss was instrumental in the Aincrad Liberation Force's victory. Asuna stiffened. Deku. She knew of him, of course. Everyone did. She had seen him on the first floor, a nervous but determined strategist who had saved the raid with his cautious planning. She had heard the stories of his non-lethal takedown of a Laughing Coffin squad, an act she privately considered both noble and dangerously naive. To her, he was an anomaly, a symbol of hope for the masses on the lower floors, but an unproven element in the high-stakes world of the front lines. The Cobb was an army. They didn't rely on inspirational figures. They relied on overwhelming force. You're suggesting we ask for his help? Godfrey asked, incredulous. He's not even in a guild. He runs a glorified charity service. He is also the most brilliant strategist in this game, Heathcliff stated, the words carrying a weight of finality. His network provides the most accurate and timely information available, information our own scouts often miss. Asuna, your frustration is clouding your judgment. Our goal is to clear the floor. If an outside consultant can help us achieve that goal, it is not only logical to seek his aid, it is our duty. Asuna clenched her jaw. Heathcliff was right, and she hated it. Her pride warred with her pragmatism. But the faces of the 20 players who had been lost in the last 2 attempts flashed in her mind. Their names were now etched on the monument of swordsmen. She couldn't afford to let pride cause another wipe. Fine, she conceded, the word clipped. I'll find him. I'll ask for his help. Finding Deku was easier than she expected. His hopeful front network had a public contact channel, and a simple message explaining her request was answered within the hour. He agreed to meet her, not in the sterile, militaristic environment of Grandam, but on floor 22, in a small, rustic log cabin overlooking a tranquil lake. It was the home he shared with a young, adopted AI named Yui, a place that had become a neutral ground for players from all walks of life. When Asuna teleported to the designated coordinates, she was momentarily taken aback by the sheer serenity of the place. The cabin was humble, with a small garden out front and the scent of pine in the air. Deku was sitting on the porch steps, a virtual notebook open in his lap, so engrossed in his writing that he didn't notice her approach at first. He was mumbling to himself, a habit she remembered from the first floor. So the drop rate for the iron-scaled lizard's hide is approximately 18%. But it seems to increase if the final blow is a piercing-type skill, which suggests a weakness variable tied to damage type, not just element. I'll need to test that with Kiritokuin's sword skills later. Ahem, Asuna cleared her throat, feeling an unfamiliar sense of awkwardness. Deku's head snapped up, his green eyes widening in surprise. He scrambled to his feet, closing the notebook with a flick of his wrist. Vice Commander Asuna. I'm so sorry. I was just finishing up some notes. Please have a seat. He gestured to a simple wooden bench. He was dressed in his signature green tunic and light leather armor, a stark contrast to her immaculate Cobb uniform. He looked younger than she expected, less like a legendary symbol and more like a diligent, slightly flustered student. Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Deku-san, Asuna said, opting for a formal, businesslike tone. She sat, her posture perfect and rigid. I will be direct. The Knights of the Blood Oath are facing a significant tactical challenge with the 55th floor boss. We believe your unique perspective on strategy could be beneficial. The fulminated adamant, Deku said immediately, his entire demeanor shifting. The flustered boy vanished, replaced by a focused, intense analyst. I've seen the reports from the hopeful front scouts. 6 arms, 2 phases. Rune-based damage negation in Phase 1, and a randomized crystal sequence interrupt in Phase 2. Your raid wiped twice with 20 casualties. Correct? Asuna blinked, taken aback by the speed and accuracy of his summary. Yes. That is correct. Our main issue is synchronization. I can imagine, Deku nodded, his eyes distant as if he were already running simulations in his head. Okay. I'll help. But I need something first. I need complete, raw data from your last 2 attempts. Combat logs, player perspectives, comms chatter, everything. And I need to scout the boss myself. Anonymously. His requests were demanding, but logical. The data can be arranged. But scouting? The area before the boss room is crawling with high-level mobs. It's too dangerous to go alone. I'll be fine, Deku said with a quiet confidence that brooked no argument. The less attention I draw, the better I can observe the boss's patterns without interference. Asuna found herself agreeing before she could second-guess it. There was an authority in his voice when he talked strategy that was completely at odds with his unassuming appearance. 2 days later, Asuna sat once again in the Cobb strategy room, this time with Deku standing beside her at the holographic table. He had spent the last 48 hours in almost complete isolation, poring over the mountains of data she had provided and conducting 3 separate, high-risk scouting runs into the boss's antechamber. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his virtual eyes, but those eyes themselves burned with an intense, analytical fire. He had called for a full meeting with all of the Cobb's squad leaders. They sat around the table, their expressions ranging from curious to openly skeptical. Godfrey, in particular, looked as if he were being forced to entertain a child. Thank you all for coming, Deku began, his voice clear and steady. He tapped the holographic table, and a new, incredibly detailed 3D model of the boss room appeared, complete with annotations and color-coded zones. Asuna noticed with a jolt that his model was more accurate than the one the Cobb's own mappers had created. Your current strategy is failing for a simple reason, Deku said, getting straight to the point. You are treating this as a DPS race with puzzle elements. You are wrong. This is not a DPS race, it is a performance. And you have all been trying to play your instruments without a conductor. He pointed to the golem's first phase. The 6 runes. You're trying to hit them simultaneously. This requires perfect timing from 6 different squad leaders, which is impossible. The new strategy is this. We will only have one person give the attack order. Me, Godfrey scoffed. You. How can you possibly see all 6 runes at once? I don't have to, Deku countered, pulling up a chart of the golem's attack animations. I've timed its attack patterns. It has a 12-second rotation. In the 8th second of that rotation, it performs a ground stomp with its rear 2 arms. For exactly 1.5 seconds during that animation, all 6 runes are visible from a single vantage point, a specific ledge on the southern wall of the chamber. I will be positioned there. I will see the runes align, and I will give a single, raid-wide command, now. Everyone with a rune assignment will execute their sword's skill on that one word. The room was silent. Asuna stared at the data. He was right. The opening was there, a tiny, almost imperceptible window that their own analysts had completely missed. Now, for Phase 2, Deku continued, his enthusiasm growing. The crystal sequence. Your problem is that you are treating it like a defensive emergency. You are reacting. We are going to be proactive. He changed the projection, displaying the room divided into a 6-section grid, like a pie chart. We are not assigning parties to crystals. We are assigning parties to zones, squads Alpha through Foxtrot. You will each be responsible for one zone. When a crystal activates, it doesn't matter what the sequence is. The only thing that matters is which zone it's in. If it's in Zone Charlie, the designated thrust specialist from Squad Charlie will hit it. If the next crystal appears in Zone Alpha, their specialist hits it. And so on. But the sequence is specific. A squad leader protested. It's always thrust/vertical/thrust. Exactly. Deku's eyes lit up. And it's the only thing that's predictable in that phase. So we will make our own predictability. We will assign the required attack type to the zones in that order. Zone Alpha is thrust. Zone Bravo is slash. Zone Charlie is vertical. Zone Delta is slash again. Zone Echo is thrust. Zone Foxtrot becomes a flexible floater squad to cover any delays. Now you're not looking for a specific crystal and a specific player. You're just looking at a zone. If a crystal lights up in your zone, you execute your pre-assigned move. It simplifies the communication down to a single piece of information, location. He had taken the most chaotic, complex mechanic they had ever faced and broken it down into a simple, elegant, almost beautiful system. He hadn't added power or devised a clever new skill combination. He had fundamentally changed their perception of the problem. Asuna was stunned. She looked from Deku's brilliant, color-coded solution to Heathcliff, who was watching the entire presentation with that same, infuriatingly calm smile. He had known the boy was capable of this. This was hero analysis in its purest form. It was the ability to look at an overwhelming, unbeatable foe and, through sheer intellect and observation, find the single, critical weakness, not in the enemy's armor, but in the system that governed it. This plan is insane, Godfrey muttered. But there was a grudging respect in his voice now. But it's the sanest thing I've heard all week. It might actually work. It will work, Deku said, his voice ringing with a conviction that left no room for doubt. But it requires perfect trust and perfect execution. Which is why there's one more change. Vice Commander Asuna, you will not be leading a squad. Asuna's head snapped towards him. What? I am the raid's second in command. I lead from the front. You are the raid's strongest offensive player, Deku corrected gently. And in this fight, you have a more important role. You will be our firefighter. During the crystal phase, if any squad is delayed, if a player is stunned, or out of position, you will not wait for an order. You will use your speed to cross the battlefield and hit their crystal for them. You are the failsafe. The one who makes sure the system doesn't break. He was taking away her command, yet giving her an even greater responsibility. He wasn't undermining her. He was utilizing her unique talent in the most effective way possible. He saw her not just as a commander, but as the Flash. She looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. She saw the exhaustion, the passion, the terrifying intelligence. And she saw the unwavering belief in the plan, in his ability to lead them. She had come to him seeking a strategist. She had found a true commander. All right, Deku-san, she said, her voice clear and strong. We will do it your way. The raid was unlike anything the Knights of the Blood Oath had ever experienced. Deku stood on his designated ledge, a small, green-clad figure overlooking the maelstrom. He wasn't fighting. He was watching. Conducting. Phase 1 begins. 12-second rotation initiated. His voice rang out, clear and calm over the raid-wide comms. Stomp incoming in 3, 2, 1. Brace. Squads, prepare for alignment. Stand by, stand by. Now, on his command, 6 simultaneous sword skills erupted, striking the runes at the exact same instant. The golem roared as its damage immunity shattered. Immunity down for 12 seconds. All units, full assault. Burn it. The Cobb, the most powerful offensive force in the game, unleashed hell. For 12 glorious seconds they did what they did best. Then, just as the golem's immunity returned, Deku's voice cut through again. Disengage. Back to defensive positions. Prepare for the next cycle. It was a perfect, deadly symphony of violence, conducted by a single, unwavering baton. Asuna, fighting near the front, found herself falling into the rhythm, her every move seeming to be anticipated by his commands. There was no wasted energy, no moments of confusion, only clear, concise direction. They pushed the boss to Phase 2 with 0 casualties. Phase 2. Crystal sequence initiated. Deku announced, his voice never losing its calm. All squads to your designated zones. Eyes up. The room plunged into semi-darkness, the first crystal activating with a chime in Zone Charlie. Charlie, go! Deku commanded. The designated player, a large man with a great sword, performed his vertical slash. the crystal shattered. A split second later, another crystal lit up across the room. Alpha! Go! A nimble fencer dashed forward, executing a perfect thrust. The system worked. It was clean, efficient, and almost foolproof, but chaos was the nature of battle. On the fourth crystal, in Zone Delta, the assigned player was caught by a stray piece of falling debris from the ceiling, a secondary hazard of the fight. He was stunned, unable to move. Delta is down. A squad leader yelled in panic, but Deku's plan had accounted for this. And so had Asuna. She didn't wait for an order. The instant she saw the player get stunned, she was already moving. She activated a burst of speed, her white and red uniform a blur against the dark chamber. She crossed the entire room in the time it took for the panicked call to finish, her lambent light already extended. She executed a flawless horizontal slash, shattering the crystal. From his perch, Deku's voice came over the comms, a note of profound admiration in it. Delta crystal cleared by the firefighter. Excellent work, Asuna-san. Echo, you're up next. Go! Asuna landed lightly, her heart pounding with a thrill she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't the thrill of command. It was the thrill of being unleashed, of using her skills to their absolute limit to save the day in a critical moment. He had trusted her, and she had delivered. The final crystal shattered, and the golem, its ultimate attack interrupted, slumped forward, vulnerable. It's down! Deku roared, his calm finally breaking, replaced by a surge of triumphant energy. All squads! Finish it! Plus ultra! The cheer was infectious. A wave of renewed vigor surged through the cob. Asuna, a fierce grin on her face, led the charge. The Knights of the Blood Oath, fighting with a unity and purpose they had never known, descended upon the boss and ended the fight in a final, brilliant explosion of light and polygons. In the silent aftermath, as the "Congratulations" banner shimmered above them, the members of the cob stood panting, looking around at each other. They were all alive. Every single one of them. They turned their gaze as one towards the ledge. Deku was making his way down, looking utterly drained but with a smile of pure, unadulterated relief on his face. Godfrey was the first to move. He walked up to Deku, the massive tank towering over the strategist. He clapped a hand on Deku's shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble. "Kid," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know how you did it, but damn. That was brilliant." The other squad leaders murmured their assent, their previous skepticism replaced by awe. Asuna approached last. She stood before him, her expression unreadable for a moment. She had been ready to resent him, to see him as a rival or an outsider. But she couldn't. He had come in, respected their strength, and given them the one thing they lacked, a vision. He hadn't fought for glory or loot. He had fought to ensure that everyone came home safe. "Deku-san," she said, her voice softer than usual. She offered a formal bow. "On behalf of the Knights of the Blood Oath, thank you. You have saved many lives today." "We all did it together," he said, rubbing the back of his neck in that endearingly awkward way of his. "Your strength and discipline made the plan work. I just pointed you in the right direction." She finally allowed herself to smile, a genuine, radiant smile that few in Inkrad ever got to see. "You did more than that. You showed us that there's more to strength than just hitting things hard." In that moment, a profound shift occurred. Asuna, the Flash, the cold and efficient vice commander, began to see the world through a new lens. She saw that true power wasn't just in her own rapier arm, but in the ability to inspire, to strategize, and to lead in a way that protected everyone. And she realized, with a clarity that was both startling and exhilarating, that the unassuming boy in front of her, the symbol of hope, might just be the strongest player in all of Inkrad, and he had never once needed to draw his sword to prove it.